in the rolling hills of Yorkshire.
During the late 18th and early
19th centuries, when superstition still mingled with reason and folk remedies
shared equal weight with emerging medicine, there lived a woman whose name would come to inspire both fear and fascination. Her story is remembered in whispers and warnings, preserved in folklore and criminal history alike.
She was called many things: a cunning woman, a fortune teller,
A healer, a thief, a liar, and eventually
a murderer. To history, she is remembered most starkly as Mary Bateman, the Leeds Poisoner. Mary Bateman's life, crimes,
and ultimate downfall form one of the most chilling sagas in English criminal law.
a dark parable about greed,
Deception and the power of belief in a
society perched uneasily between the superstitions of the past and the rationalism of the future.
To understand how she rose to such infamous notoriety, we must begin with her earliest years.
In a Yorkshire village where
Tales of witches and wise women still held power over hearts and minds.
Mary was born in 1768 in Isenby, near Thirsk, to a farming family.
Her parents were hardworking and respectable, but Mary herself was marked early by mischief.
Those who knew her as a child would later recall her gift for lying.
Her knack for manipulation, and her ability to charm even when she should not be trusted. As she grew, this talent only sharpened, and it would one day prove both her weapon and her downfall. By her teenage years, Mary had taken to petty theft,
She was accused more than once of stealing from neighbors and family alike.
but somehow she wriggled out of lasting punishment. She had the gift of persuasion, a tongue quick enough to spin excuses that softened suspicion, and when charm failed,
She would weave tales of dark consequence for those who crossed her.
this combination of fear and fascination would become the essence of her adult life. In her early 20s, Mary moved to the bustling industrial town of Leeds. It was a city growing rapidly during the Industrial Revolution, filled with opportunity but also hardship. Factories belched smoke, mills thundered with machinery, and migrants from the countryside poured in, bringing with them traditions of folk, magic, and superstition that mingled uneasily with the new rational world of science and progress. Leeds was fertile ground for a woman like Mary Bateman, who understood how to exploit the anxieties and hopes of people caught between two worlds. Mary soon cultivated a reputation as a wise woman, someone who could tell fortunes, offer charms, break curses,
And predict the future. This role, steeped in old folklore, was still common in working class communities,
People feared witchcraft, sought amulets for protection.
and turned to cunning women when doctors failed.
Mary positioned herself as such a figure, and she found eager clients. She used herbal remedies, small tricks of sleight of hand,
And the age-old tactic of telling people what they wanted or dreaded to hear.
but Mary was not content with coins earned from palm readings or charms.
Her ambition was greater, her greed more insatiable. Soon she was weaving elaborate scams, often invoking imaginary figures of even greater power than herself.
One such invention would become notorious: Mrs. Blythe, a fictional oracle whom Mary claimed to serve.
She convinced clients that Mrs. Blythe
Was a woman of vast,
supernatural knowledge who could see into the future and prescribe remedies for any ailment or misfortune, though, of course, her guidance had to be delivered through Mary herself. The scheme worked brilliantly,
Mary charged clients for letters from Mrs. Blythe.
for charms, for potions, and for advice. She positioned herself as the necessary intermediary.
Between her clients and this mysterious, unseen woman, to the fearful and the desperate, it seemed entirely plausible. And to Mary, it was a gold mine. But simple trickery would not sate her hunger for money and power. Mary's methods darkened. She began to concoct poisonous potions.
Often under the guise of protective charms or medicines, which she sold to her victims,
These mixtures could weaken and terrify, convincing clients that they were under curses only Mary could lift for a fee.
of course.
By rendering her clients dependent upon her, she tightened her control and emptied their purses. Mary's infamy grew, though often in whispers. Some feared her, believing she had true occult power. Others suspected her of fraud. But she was clever, slippery, and rarely caught. Yet her downfall would begin with one family, the Perigo family. William and Rebecca Perigo were a couple living in Leeds, respectable but ordinary, who fell into Mary's orbit in the early 1800 seconds. Rebecca
Suffered from nervous ailments and anxieties, and the couple sought out Mary's supposed wisdom.
Mary quickly ensnared them with tales of curses and the promise of relief through her secret methods.
She persuaded them that Mrs. Blythe
Had diagnosed a terrible misfortune, upon their household.
A misfortune that could only be lifted through ritual and medicine.
Mary sold them a series of
Potions supposedly protective,
but these were laced with poison. At first, the doses were small.
weakening Rebecca, making her ill but not killing her. This served Mary's purpose perfectly, convincing the Perigos
That the danger was real and that only
Mary's continual aid could keep.
Rebecca alive.
Again and again, they paid her, draining their savings.
While Rebecca's health deteriorated,
Finally, Mary prepared a pudding for Rebecca, one that would prove fatal. In 1806, Rebecca Perigo died in agony after consuming Mary's poisoned concoction. Her husband, devastated, soon began to suspect the truth.
William went to the authorities, and Mary Bateman's carefully woven web began to unravel. The investigation that followed exposed
Not just the death of Rebecca, but a
pattern of fraud, deceit,
and suspected poisoning stretching far back into Mary's career. Testimony revealed the elaborate inventions of Mrs. Blythe,
the poisonous potions, and Mary's ruthless manipulation of vulnerable people.
the scale of her deception shocked Leeds and all of Yorkshire.
Mary was arrested and brought to trial at York Castle in 1809. Proceedings drew enormous crowds. People flocked from miles around to see the woman who had been called a witch, a sorceress, a healer, and a murderer. The press dubbed her the Leeds Witch or the Yorkshire Poisoner, and sensational stories filled the papers. In court, Mary attempted to maintain her composure, but the evidence was damning. Witness after witness testified to her frauds and manipulations.
Most crucially, chemical analysis, still primitive by modern
Standards, but advancing in this
era, confirmed the presence
of poison in the remains of Rebecca Perigo. Mary's defense tried to argue
that the Perigos had brought about,
their own misfortune.
or that Mary had been merely a messenger, but the jury was unmoved.
After a dramatic trial, Mary Bateman was found guilty of murder.
The sentence was death by hanging.
On March 20, 1809, she was executed at York. Reports say the crowd numbered in the thousands, eager to witness the downfall of the woman who had once struck fear into so many hearts. Her body, in keeping with the grisly traditions of the time, was dissected, and strips of her skin were even rumored to have been sold as charms. Grisly irony for a woman who had spent her life
Peddling charms of her own, the legend of Mary Bateman did not end with her death.
Her name lingered in Yorkshire folklore, retold in ghost stories and cautionary tales.
Some claim to see her spirit wandering the streets of Leeds.
Others spoke of her as a warning against superstition and gullibility.
In criminal history,
She is remembered as one of the last of the
so-called cunning women whose career ended.
not in obscurity, but in infamy. Her case remains a fascinating study in the overlap between belief and deception, between folk magic and criminal intent, between fear and fraud.
Mary Bateman exploited the liminal space between
An old world still haunted by witches and a new world moving towards science.
She preyed on desperation, weaving lies that promised relief but delivered death. And so, the Leeds Poisoner became a legend, not merely a criminal,
But a figure larger than life.
a warning carved into the cultural memory of Yorkshire,
Her story tells us much about her time,
about the dangers of blind trust.
and about the human hunger for hope even when offered by the darkest of hands.
Thank you for watching Crimes Through Time. If this story fascinated you,
Make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more.
journeys into history's darkest mysteries.
And tell us in the comments, do you think Adelaide Bartlett was truly innocent? Or did she get away with the perfect crime? We'll see you in the next episode.
Until then, stay curious, stay safe.